Since their successful defence of the America's Cup on their home waters in Auckland in 2020, the Kiwis have had a bit on, as they say. Organising a Cup cycle involves a huge amount of work, and it's never an easy ride. Taking the Cup to Europe wasn't universally popular down under. But today that's water under the bridge, as the next Cup cycle has started. It kicked off with a preliminary event in a small Spanish town just along the coast from Barcelona. And of course, as a Cup addict, I was there. And in true Cup style, there was a curveball from the off. This is it, Vilanova, Geltru in southern Spain. This is where the road to the 37th America's Cup begins. And after an endless scorching summer, it's raining on the opening day of the first America's Cup preliminary event. It's been 3 years since New Zealand successfully defended the Cup in Auckland, and now, for a whole bunch of reasons, they've brought the competition to the top of the world. They've also created new boats and new rules for the second generation AC-75s. When it comes to the boats that will be used and the technology involved, it's a pretty complex path to the America's Cup that involves a variety of foiling monohulls. But for now, all that matters is that here in Vilanova, out there, 6 teams will go head to head in the first official competition of the 37th America's Cup. And this time we go back to starting the cycle with strict one designs, the new AC-40s. 6 identical boats, each with a 4-man crew. There'll be nowhere for teams to hide. Over 3 days of racing, they'll only have themselves to blame if their performance isn't up to scratch. That's pretty unusual for the Cup. Normally, teams can deflect attention by pointing to the development that they're doing on their boats, while promising that when they get out for real, things will be different. But this time, there'll be no excuses. And that suits the defenders and indeed the challengers very well. Seeing what your potential opponents can do when it comes to boat handling and setup provides a valuable insight. But an insight that the weather had decided wasn't going to happen on the opening day. It was clear that it had been a brave attempt to get the first day underway, but in the face of a rather unpleasant forecast. Big showers came through, thunder, lightning, visibility went down to 150 metres, and sadly, by the time we got to about 4:10, racing for the opening day was abandoned. Well, there's not a lot to say about today, other than I was watching on the film, seeing you as you were being towed out, and I saw your head shake from side to side.
Yeah. I mean, look, I thought it was a long shot to be going out there, and always a little concerning when you're going out and you know there's some lightning on the radar. But look, I think we gave it every chance we could today. They did their best, but hey, as we all know, at the end of the day, Mother Nature usually decides.
It almost seems that the weather gods have got it in for the America's Cup at times, because in all the Cups I've covered, there have been quite a few that have had the rug pulled out from underneath them on the opening day. Well, that was the case yesterday here in Vilanova, but today is a very different day indeed. Sun's out, the breeze is up, the spectator fleet has arrived. It's a Saturday, there's a huge amount of excitement here, and the racing is about to start. For the opening race, there was just enough breeze to fly. The Kiwis looked as good up the first beat as they had done in practice, but pinching around the top mark dropped them off the foils, and the French came slicing through to take the lead. And while they too came off the foils later in the race and were pressed hard by Luna Rossa, the French went on to win. American Magic came second. Going into the event, those that had watched them in practice weren't surprised to see them doing well. Off the starts, they were consistently up there. After a long delay, there was a brave attempt at getting the second race underway in a breeze that had decided to pack up for the day. The prospects for racing looked grim. After having been towed up onto their foils before the start, the only team to remain on them when the start gun went was Alinghi Red Bull Racing, who took no time in doing a horizon job on a fleet that was parked. 2 minutes later, somehow the Kiwis had managed to get themselves onto their foils and were now tearing around the 3-leg course. But now the Swiss had fallen off theirs after a jibe and were powerless to stop Emirates Team New Zealand from charging past to take the win. Anybody who'd looked at the weather forecast earlier in the day knew that there was a strong possibility that as the day went on, the wind conditions were going to drop. And unfortunately, that is exactly what happened. But there were two significant points out of this first day's racing. The first was just how quick the Kiwis are. They seem to be able to get their boat around the course in just about anything. And having watched some of the practice racing just before the event started, they were dominant there too. There was hardly any wind, and you did it again. How are you getting up on the foils?
Yeah, we obviously had a lot of practice at it over the last 8 years or so, and no, I'm just really pleased with the way the team executed. Yeah, we had that one opportunity and made it stick and foiled around the racetrack from there. So obviously really disappointed not to be falling at the start. Felt like we had opportunities to do that, but didn't quite manage to execute. But then, to fall around the track from there and take our first win in this event, something we're really proud of.
In those kind of conditions, which is trickier, going upwind on the foils or coming downwind on the foils?
Yeah, they're both tricky in different ways. Obviously, going upwind, it's kind of just choosing your mode and making sure you attack in a place where there's enough wind that you can pull off the manoeuvre. That's obviously what we got wrong in the pre-start. We committed to going past a few boats and then never got another puff to have enough wind to pull off a jibe. So we ended up having to go into the jibe at below 6 knots, which is never fun. But we're obviously really proud with the way we dealt with the situation from there and took our first one.
The other thing that was impressive was to see the team that had had their AC40 for just 3 weeks and had sailed it for just 14 days win a race. No one was expecting that. Have you practiced in those kind of conditions much before? I mean, you've only had, 14 days in the boat, I think?
I think it's we done 12 days on the AC40, and that was the first time we sailed the displacement mode. But yeah, we just trust our feeling and try to race as good as we can. I mean, we had also some good shift for us, so we'll see tomorrow. But it's the same mindset. We just want to learn a lot about this boat and how to race it. And hopefully, if tomorrow we are able to race at the right boat speed and with the right maneuvers, we will be able to have good races.
2 days into the 3-day event, and it was clear that this had been a difficult start to the new Cup cycle. On the plus side, there were at least some points on the board as the racing went into the final day. Interestingly, it was the least experienced and the most experienced teams that were sitting in first and second on the leaderboard, with Alinghi in third. Teams like Ineos Britannia, Luna Rossa and American Magic have been struggling, even though of the three, the Americans had shown more confident performances. But all of these teams have spent more time on their development boats. Perhaps this was the reason.
We got a lot of distraction. No? The AC40 is going to be a huge event for the public, for media purpose, but for us as a team it's a distraction because it's a time taken away from our development process in Cagliari and looking forward for the AC75. Obviously it's good for the sailing team because it's an opportunity for them to sail and train with the other guys. But the boat is going to be completely different. It's going to be a completely different game. This boat is pretty forgiving, where the AC75 is going to be way more hard to sail and to race with. And we got some other parallel projects like the hydrogen cut and all of that. But at the end, this is the America's Cup. You cannot complain. No? If you accept and you sign the protocol and you accept the protocol, you know what you're dealing with. I mean, the game is this one, so if you want to be involved and you want to take part of this game, you have to accept everything.
Well, we spent much less time in the AC40 than some of the other teams, not all of it, but some of the other teams, because we decided to build our own test boat and really focus all of our resources on that platform. So our number of days that we sailed in the AC40 is quite significantly down to some of the other teams, and that's showing particularly in the lighter airs where it's more difficult to set the boat up properly, to get the technique right for the sailors to get the best out of the boat. And we're learning rapidly, and it's great to be out here against these teams that have got more hours in the boat and frankly are doing a better job than we are. And we've got another day to try and learn as much as we can before we start racing for keeps.
And it's a complicated cup, this one, it strikes me. There's 3 designs that you've got to get your head around. AC40, LEQ12, that's optional, but you've got one, and an AC75. Does it feel complicated to you? Is this the most complex one that you've done?
The prioritising of that is difficult. We're different. We've got our own test boat, or LEQ12, if you want to call it that. As we talked about, some of the other teams have used the AC40 platform as their LEQ12 platform. So, getting not only your sailing time, prioritising that, but also for your engineers and your designers, prioritising AC40 or LEQ12 stroke T6 stroke AC75. That's really tricky to make sure you're putting your resources, focusing it on the right area.
So going into the final day, the forecast looked promising, with 10 knots on the cards and a revised schedule for 3 races and 1 match racing final. Race 3 saw the 6-boat fleet on foils from the off. This was more like it. In just 8 knots of breeze, they were doing 25 knots upwind and 32 knots downhill. But it was still easy to trip up and fall off the foils, unless you were the Kiwis, who fought off American Magic. And at the finish, it was another Kiwi win and a second to the Americans. In race 4, there was a hint that the breeze was dropping, but once again, American Magic was in good shape from the off. The Kiwis, meanwhile, had been slam-dunked by the Italians and were off their foils. Chasing the Americans, Alinghi Red Bull Racing were delivering an impressive performance. And while they didn't get anywhere near catching the Americans, who'd run away with this race, they scored an impressive second. The Kiwis had recovered, but only to 4th. The final fleet race saw the breeze drop even further as the big jibs came out. Once again, the best 2 performers at the start were the Kiwis and the Americans. And while the French got into second at one point and the Kiwis slipped off their foils, by the finish it was American Magic followed by Emirates Team New Zealand. But by then the breeze had disappeared, forcing the abandonment of the final match race between these 2.
This is the race committee. We have reached the time limit and this race has been stopped.
This left American Magic the overall and well-deserved winners of the first preliminary regatta. Did you feel pretty strong when you came into this event?
Yeah, we missed a couple of the practice races 2 weeks ago when the guys were doing the fleet racing to focus on our development for the 75. So we were a little concerned that maybe we were giving up some time racing for the long-term goal, which is obviously the America's Cup next year. But from that, I think throughout the weekend, the 4 of us rarely sail on the same boat together. So between myself, Tom, Michael and Riley, to sail together as a foursome, it's been really important to develop the communications and just back each other up and help each other and know when the crossovers are between who's in charge. So from that side, I think we've done a fantastic job this weekend of developing that, and it really shone through. I thought in the racing today, we were always on the same page and we were executing very smoothly, very calmly, and it seemed to work.
But you may be sitting there thinking, who cares? This event doesn't count towards points come the Cup. This event doesn't get you a leg up into the Challenger selection trials either. In short, this event doesn't count for anything. Except, in the minds of the sailors and the teams, it does. They only have one gear, to beat their opponents. For all the usual talk of tactical play and sandbagging, winning on the water is what matters.
We all love the AC40. We think it's a fantastic class, and to be able to race against each other one-on-one, like in-house, the match racing we have is phenomenal. And it's sharpening us up, getting us better, even if we don't have the same foils under the boat. It's a very impressive tool for us to use. So to come here to test ourselves against all the other guys in the same equipment, it's a great way to do it. And I hope we do more events like this, because it's really fun to go racing these boats.
But it goes further than this. Whether it's on the water or ashore, in the Cup, every opportunity to beat or intimidate another team is a step in the right direction for a Cup campaign. That's why this is considered the most intense competition in the sailing world, because in the America's Cup, every millimetre counts. And for the 37th America's Cup, that started here in Vilanova.